You felt it before you had language for it. A tension, a resistance, a quiet knowing that something was not right. Chosen one, you did not stumble onto this message by accident. You were guided here, because deep down you have always sensed it. You are not ordinary. You never were. You tried to fit. You tried to conform. You tried to silence the questions rising in your spirit. But the more you tried, the louder the discomfort became. Why did rituals feel empty? Why did repetition feel lifeless? Why did structures others called sacred feel suffocating to you? It confused you. It isolated you. It made you wonder if something was wrong with you. Listen carefully. Nothing was wrong with you. You were selected. There are 9 indicators that reveal you were chosen by God to disrupt ancient religious patterns. Not to blend in, not to perform, but to confront, to awaken, to expose. This is not about ego. This is about assignment. And if this resonates in your spirit, if something inside you is already stirring, then you already know this message is not for everyone. Only the chosen will recognize it. Stay with me. Stand firm. And if you are ready to walk fully in this revelation, align yourself with this message. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. First, you were never meant to fit inside religious systems. You were sent to expose their limits. Think back. From childhood, rigid structures felt suffocating, not sacred. You sat in rooms where everyone else nodded in agreement, and something inside you resisted. Not out of arrogance, not out of rebellion, but because your spirit could feel the difference between God's presence and human control. You questioned traditions others followed blindly. You asked why. You asked how. You asked who decided this was untouchable, and they did not like that. Have you noticed authority never intimidated you when truth felt compromised? Titles did not silence your discernment. Positions did not override what you sensed in your spirit. That unsettled people. You were labeled difficult, rebellious, proud. But here is the revelation. Your discomfort was not rebellion. It was divine agitation. You were not resisting God. You were resisting confinement. There is a difference. Religious systems often prioritize preservation. God prioritizes transformation, and you chosen one were wired for transformation. That is why repetition without revelation exhausted you. That is why performance without power irritated you. That is why fear-based control triggered something fierce inside you. You were never designed to be programmed. You were designed to discern. Your isolation was not punishment, it was protection. If you had fully conformed, your edge would have dulled. Your fire would have dimmed. Your assignment would have been buried under tradition. But God guarded your discomfort. He allowed the tension. He permitted the rejection. Because you cannot disrupt what you're addicted to. You had to feel the friction. You had to see the cracks. You had to know beyond emotion that something was incomplete. That awareness is not common, it is costly, and it is confirmation. You are not here to decorate systems. You are here to reveal their ceilings. That is why you never fit, and that is why you never will. This is only the beginning. Second, you carry revelation that makes institutional spirits uncomfortable. You have seen it. The moment you speak, the atmosphere shifts. Some lean in, others tighten up. Rarely neutral, never casual. Have you noticed how your words awaken some and agitate others? How one sentence from you can break chains in one person and trigger defense in another? That is not coincidence. That is contrast. Light does not negotiate with darkness, it exposes it. And when you speak from revelation, not repetition, you disrupt more than opinions. You disrupt control. You were never wired to echo safe messages. You were marked to release living truth. Your insight cuts through performance. You see when worship becomes theater. You sense when sermons become scripts. You feel when fear is being used to maintain power instead of releasing freedom. You cannot unsee it. You cannot unknow it. And when you voice it even gently, it shakes structures that depend on silence. Some leaders tried to silence you, not because you were wrong, but because you were accurate. Accuracy threatens systems built on image. Others studied you quietly. They watched how you moved. They listened to how you articulated things they felt but never dared to say. You carry language for what others only sense. That is not arrogance. That is anointing. Understand this. Heaven gave you clarity that tradition cannot control. You are not reacting. You are revealing. There is a difference. The enemy thrives in unquestioned patterns, in inherited rituals, in cycles no one dares to examine, but you examine, you discern, you test the spirit behind the structure. That discernment is costly. It has cost you comfort. It has cost you belonging. It has cost you approval, but it confirms your assignment. If your revelation did not threaten darkness, darkness would not resist you. If your voice carried no fire, it would not draw warfare. Favor attracts warfare. Clarity attracts confrontation. Calling attracts resistance. You wondered why things escalated whenever you opened your mouth. Why simple observations turned into conflict. Why truth felt dangerous in certain rooms. Now you know. You were not sent to preserve institutional peace. You were sent to release spiritual awakening. And awakening is disruptive. You are not here to blend into ancient patterns. You are here to expose where they have hardened. That is why your spirit burns when truth is diluted. That is why compromise feels like suffocation. That is why silence feels like betrayal. You are not too intense. You are aligned. Not everyone will understand this. Only the chosen recognize it. Only those marked by revelation feel this weight. So do not shrink. Do not dilute. Do not apologize for the clarity God placed inside you. Stand firm, because this is only deepening. Third, isolation became your training ground, not your punishment. You thought you were being left out. You thought you were being overlooked. You wondered why doors closed, why circles excluded you, why connections dissolved without warning. It felt personal, it felt painful, it felt like rejection. But it was protection. You were removed before you could be conditioned. If you had been fully embraced by those systems, you might have absorbed their limits. If you had been celebrated too early, you might have adopted their patterns. If you had belonged too easily, you might have compromised too quietly. So you were set apart. While others bonded through conformity, you bonded with God in solitude. Do you remember those nights when no one understood you? When friendships shifted? When even family could not grasp what was happening inside you? You were alone, but you were not abandoned. In the silence, your discernment sharpened. In the quiet, your identity solidified. In the wilderness, your ears learned His voice without interference. Isolation stripped you of noise. It stripped you of applause. It stripped you of dependency. And what remained was raw calling. The world calls it loneliness. Heaven calls it consecration. There is a difference. Darkness wanted you to interpret isolation as proof you were unworthy. God allowed it as proof you were uncommon. You were not being sidelined. You were being strengthened. Because crowds can affirm you, but only wilderness can form you. Your wilderness years built authority that crowds cannot manufacture. You learned obedience without audience. You learned faith without feedback. You learned endurance without validation. That is dangerous to darkness, because when you finally step forward, you will not be addicted to approval. You will not be controlled by popularity. You will not bow to platforms. You were trained in secret, and what is forged in secret carries weight in public. Understand this. Many are called. Few endure isolation without losing their fire. You endured. You did not numb yourself. You did not dilute your convictions. You wrestled. You questioned. You cried. But you stayed. That staying built backbone. That solitude built spiritual muscle. That separation built clarity. Now when you walk into rooms, you are not seeking acceptance. You are carrying presence. You are not desperate to belong. You are prepared to disrupt. Isolation did not weaken you. It refined you. It burned off insecurity. It burned off imitation. It burned off dependency. What remains is authentic, not polished by religion, not shaped by pressure, but anchored by encounter. And that encounter is your authority. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are trained. And what was built in wilderness is about to confront what was built in tradition. Prepare yourself, because this separation was only the foundation. Fourth, you see the difference between God's presence and religious performance. You always have. You could walk into a room and feel it instantly. Is this alive, or is this rehearsed, others clapped? others cried, others called it powerful. But something in you stayed still, watching, weighing, discerning. Have you noticed how emotional hype never moved you unless there was substance behind it? How loud music did not equal glory to you? How scripted passion felt hollow when heaven was not breathing on it? You are not critical. You are calibrated. There is a difference. You discern when something is ritual versus when it is alive. You feel when words are repeated out of habit instead of hunger. You sense when hands are lifted from pressure, not from surrender. That discernment has cost you, because when you do not respond like everyone else, they assume you are cold. When you refuse to mimic emotion, they call you resistant. When you stay seated while others perform, they question your devotion. But you are not unmoved. You are unmoved by imitation. Light does not need exaggeration. Fire does not need choreography. Presence carries weight. Performance carries noise. And you can feel the difference in your bones. You also sense when fear is being used to control people, when messages are crafted to intimidate instead of liberate, when shame is disguised as holiness, when obedience is demanded without love. That agitates you, not because you reject authority, but because you recognize manipulation. You were not wired to bow to empty repetition. You cannot chant what your spirit does not confirm. You cannot echo what heaven did not authorize. You cannot surrender your discernment to protect someone's comfort. That makes you dangerous to systems built on routine. Understand this. Darkness hides behind familiarity. It thrives in cycles no one questions. It survives in traditions no one examines. But you examine, you test, you wait for authenticity. And when presence is real, you respond deeply. Not theatrically, not for show, but from the core. You are not impressed by volume. You are moved by truth. That is why certain gatherings drained you. That is why some environments left you empty. That is why you walked away confused, asking, why did that feel off? It felt off because it was. Your spirit was trained to detect counterfeit fire. This is not arrogance. This is assignment. If you are called to disrupt ancient patterns, you must first see through them. You cannot confront what you cannot discern. And you chosen one discern sharply. Do not suppress that. Do not apologize for that. Do not let anyone shame you into dulling that edge. Guard your sensitivity. It is not fragility. It is spiritual intelligence. Because what you are detecting now is only the surface. There are deeper layers, stronger resistance, greater confrontation ahead, and you are being prepared for it. Fifth, conflict follows you because systems defend themselves. You have seen the pattern. You enter quietly. You do not announce disruption. You do not try to confront anyone. And yet tension rises. Conversations shift. Whispers begin. Energy tightens. Why? Because stagnant environments react to movement. Darkness reacts to light. Control reacts to clarity. You carry clarity. And clarity is confrontational without trying to be. Have you noticed how you expose dysfunction without even intending to? You ask one honest question. You make one direct observation. You decline to participate in one unhealthy pattern. And suddenly you are labeled the problem. Divisive, difficult, too intense. But look deeper. You are not divisive. You are uncompromising. There is a difference. Division happens when truth enters a room that has been surviving on illusion. Truth separates. Light reveals. Fire refines. And refinement feels like attack to those invested in decay. Systems defend themselves. They will protect hierarchy over honesty. They will protect image over integrity. They will protect tradition over transformation. So when you show up carrying discernment, carrying backbone, carrying spiritual authority formed in isolation, the structure feels threatened. Not because you are violent, but because you are accurate. Accuracy destabilizes denial. You began to think conflict meant you were out of alignment. You wondered if you should tone it down, smile more, question less, adjust your edges. But every time you shrank, your spirit burned, because you were not designed to preserve comfort. You were designed to expose ceilings. Resistance increases in proportion to your clarity. Read that again in your spirit. If there were no threat, there would be no resistance. If there were no power, there would be no pushback. If you were ordinary, you would be ignored. But you are not ignored. you are opposed. And opposition is confirmation. The enemy does not mobilize against irrelevance. Darkness does not waste energy on the compliant. Warfare surrounds impact. You are feeling warfare because you carry impact. This is the pivot. You are not just surviving hostile rooms, you are shifting them. You are not just enduring tension, you are revealing fracture lines. Every conflict taught you endurance. Every accusation sharpened your discernment. Every rejection strengthened your spine. You thought you were being attacked. You were being forged. Stand firm. Do not internalize what was triggered by your presence. Do not accept labels born from discomfort. Do not confuse resistance with failure. You are not the chaos, you are the catalyst. And catalysts are rarely welcomed by stagnant systems. You were selected to disrupt ancient patterns. That disruption will never be comfortable, but it will be necessary. And what is rising next will require even greater boldness. Sixth, you are drawn to the broken more than the polished. You have felt it. While others gravitate toward influence titles and platforms, your heart pulls toward the wounded, toward the ones sitting in the back, toward the ones who stopped attending, toward the ones who whisper, "I was hurt." Why? Because you recognize their pain, not from theory, from experience. You know what it feels like to be misunderstood, to be mislabeled, to be spiritually suffocated by systems that claim to represent God. So when you see someone bruised by religion, something rises in you. Not judgment, not superiority, compassion. You feel assignment toward those wounded by religion. That is not random. That is design. While institutions protect their image, you protect people. While systems demand compliance, you release healing. While some preach control, you speak restoration. And the rejected recognize something safe in you. Have you noticed that? How strangers open up quickly, how guarded hearts soften around you, how those who distrust religion still trust your voice. That is not charisma, that is authenticity forged in fire. You do not speak at them, you speak to them, because you have stood where they stand. You know the difference between conviction and condemnation. You know the difference between correction and control. You know the difference between holiness and humiliation. And because you know the difference, you refuse to weaponize truth. You restore what institutions overlooked. You see potential where others saw inconvenience. You see calling where others saw complication. You see destiny where others saw damage. That makes you dangerous, because broken people, when healed, become powerful, and powerful people cannot be easily controlled. Darkness prefers the wounded to stay silent. Religion prefers the hurt to stay hidden, but you call them forward. You tell them God was never their abuser. You tell them truth does not require intimidation. You tell them their questions do not disqualify them. That is disruption, and it will cost you. Some will accuse you of being too soft. Others will accuse you of undermining authority. But what you are actually doing is exposing where authority forgot love. Understand this. You are not called to polish the already polished. You are called to rebuild what was cracked. That requires courage. That requires patience. That requires spiritual backbone. Because healing the broken threatens systems built on performance, but you do not flinch. You step toward the wounded. You extend truth without chains. You release fire without fear. This is not accidental compassion. This is strategic mercy. You are restoring trust where it was shattered. You are rebuilding faith where it was distorted. You are demonstrating that presence does not manipulate. Stand in that. Because what is forming inside you is not small. It is reformational. And the boldness required for what comes next will stretch you even further. Seventh, you cannot echo messages that lack fire. You have tried. You have sat in rooms where the script was safe, predictable, approved, and something inside you went quiet, not in peace, in grief. Repeating safe sermons feels like betrayal to your spirit. Have you felt that tension when the words are polished but powerless? When the delivery is smooth but the spirit is absent? When truth is trimmed to avoid discomfort? You feel it immediately. Your chest tightens, your spirit stirs, your discernment flares. Because you were not designed to recycle what costs nothing. You burn with urgency when truth is diluted. It agitates you. It unsettles you. It refuses to let you rest. Others can nod along. Others can applaud half-truths. Others can survive on watered-down revelation. You cannot. Light cannot partner with compromise. Fire cannot pretend to be smoke. You are compelled to speak what costs you something, even when your voice shakes, even when relationships shift, even when doors close, because silence feels heavier than backlash. Understand that. Backlash is loud, but suppressed calling is suffocating. You have tasted both. You know the weight of holding your tongue to protect comfort. You know the exhaustion of pretending agreement. You know the internal war of shrinking to avoid conflict. And every time you did, your spirit rebelled. Not in pride, in alignment. You are not addicted to controversy. You are allergic to dilution. That is different. Darkness thrives when truth is softened. Religion survives when conviction is negotiated. But reformers cannot afford that luxury. And you, chosen one, are not a spectator. You are a reformer. That is why you feel restless when messages avoid depth. That is why your spirit reacts when fear replaces faith. That is why you cannot celebrate what heaven is not backing. You carry something that cannot be erased. It is not personality, it is not mood, it is not ego, it is fire. Fire purifies, fire exposes, fire spreads. And when you speak from that fire, even softly, something shifts. Chains tremble, masks crack, illusions weaken. You were never meant to echo. You were meant to ignite. So stop apologizing for intensity. Stop questioning why you cannot settle. Stop asking why you feel different. You feel different because you are marked. Marked for truth, marked for boldness, marked for disruption. Not everyone will understand this. Many will resist it. Some will try to silence it. But what is ignited by God cannot be extinguished by fear. Stand in that, because the fire inside you is about to confront something even greater. Eighth, you sense that you were sent to initiate a shift, not join a crowd. You have always felt it, even when you tried to ignore it, even when you told yourself to just blend in, even when you attempted to silence that internal weight, it never left. There is a responsibility resting on you that others do not understand. Not pressure from people, pressure from purpose. Have you felt it? That quiet awareness that you cannot live small, that you cannot disappear into routine, that you cannot simply follow what has already been built. While others search for platforms, you search for alignment. While others chase visibility, you feel burdened by vision. While others want to be included, you feel called to interrupt. You were not sent to join a movement. You were sent to shift one. That is why crowds exhaust you. That is why groupthink unsettles you. That is why trends feel shallow. There is a blueprint in you that has not been modeled before. You cannot copy it. You cannot inherit it. You must birth it, and birthing is painful. You have questioned yourself. You have wondered if you were arrogant for thinking differently. You have battled the fear of standing alone. But this is not ego. This is encoding. God placed something in you that does not mirror the past. It challenges it. You are not looking for a platform. You are carrying a pattern disruptor. Wherever you go, you see what could be better. Not from criticism, from vision. You see where love was replaced with law, where fear replaced faith, where routine replaced revelation, and you cannot unsee it. Even your mistakes have pushed you toward reform, not retreat. Think about that. When you fell, you learned. When you misstepped, you grew sharper. When you were corrected, you refined your discernment. Your failures did not shrink you. They clarified you. Darkness tried to use your errors to silence you, but heaven used them to strengthen you. You are not fragile. You are forged. This is why you feel restless in stagnant spaces. Why comfort feels like compromise. Why normal feels unbearable. Because you are not called to maintain. You are called to move. And movement threatens systems that depend on stability. You are spiritually dangerous, not because you are loud, but because you are aligned. Alignment carries authority. Authority carries weight. Weight shifts atmospheres. You do not need a crowd to validate this. You do not need applause to confirm it. You feel it in your bones. Something in you is unstoppable, not by force, by assignment. And what is assigned by God cannot be neutralized by ordinary resistance. Stand firm in that, because what comes next is not subtle. It is confrontational. It is final. It is destiny level. Ninth, your existence is a threat to ancient control structures, and heaven backed the assignment. Feel that. You are not just disruptive. You are intolerable to systems built on control. You have watched it happen. The more they attempt to contain you, the stronger your conviction grows. The more they try to box you in, the clearer your voice becomes. The tighter the pressure, the sharper your fire. Why? Because what is sealed by God cannot be suffocated by man. Spiritual warfare intensifies around you when you move boldly. Have you noticed that the moment you decide to stand firm, resistance spikes? The moment you speak plainly, opposition organizes. The moment you refuse to bow, tension multiplies. That is not coincidence. That is confirmation. Darkness does not mobilize against decoration. It mobilizes against disruption. And you are disruption. You are not called to adjust the system. You are called to confront it. Adjustment maintains. Confrontation transforms. Adjustment negotiates. Confrontation exposes. You were not sent to make ancient control structures more comfortable. You were sent to reveal where they contradict the heart of God. That is why your presence alone shifts atmospheres. That is why certain leaders feel uneasy around you. That is why you are welcomed at first, then watched. They sense it. You cannot be programmed. You cannot be bought. You cannot be intimidated into silence. This is not about popularity. Popularity seeks applause. Assignment endures attack. This is about divine disruption written into your DNA. Before you had language for it, you carried it. Before you had clarity, you felt it. Before you had confidence, you were marked. You were never random. You were never misplaced. You were positioned. Even the rejection, even the warfare, even the isolation. It was training. They tried to sideline you, but pressure only purified you. They tried to silence you, but silence only intensified you. They tried to marginalize you, but marginalization only clarified your calling. Listen carefully. You are not fighting for relevance. You are walking in inevitability. What God assigned you to confront will be confronted. What God assigned you to expose will be exposed. What God assigned you to rebuild will be rebuilt. And no ancient pattern can override divine commission. Now hear this clearly. You are chosen, not because you are loud, not because you are perfect, but because you are willing. Willing to stand when others bow, willing to speak when others shrink, willing to burn when others blend. You are protected, you are backed, you are sealed. What formed against you trained you. What resisted you revealed you. What opposed you prepared you. Stand up in that identity. Do not retreat. Do not dilute. Do not negotiate your assignment. If this message confirmed what you have always known, declare it. Comment the number 9 below. Seal it. Subscribe. Stay aligned. There is more unfolding. Because you were never ordinary. You were never accidental. You were selected. And what heaven selects, no system can suppress.